Welcome to the Julia Sadler Show. Today we are going to be talking about infertility and what that means for Christians, Christian couples, and our faith. We're going to be looking at how to decide if you should go to the fertility doctor, how to talk to your spouse about it, and just some questions theologically that a lot of people have reached out asking about as far as what does this mean for our faith, what does this mean for what we believe about God and that He is the author of life. So, if you have followed my story, you have heard about losing 3 sweet babies in miscarriages. And after the 3rd miscarriage, we made the decision to go to a fertility doctor. I'll always remember our first trip to the fertility doctor. My husband Ryan and I sat awkwardly in a waiting room. They were playing Backstreet Boys' greatest hits through the ceiling speaker, and we were trying to avoid making eye contact with the other couples and commenting on the very unusual art. It was a mermaid family statue. I'm not kidding. The sculpture was of a mommy and a daddy mermaid holding a baby mermaid in the air. It's very awkward. The artwork and music choice created a nice comedic relief from the anxiety of wondering what would the doctor say? What would be my prognosis? What if she said I had no chances of carrying a baby to term? What if there were no answers for why I easily became pregnant but could never stay pregnant? The roller coaster of 3 pregnancies followed by 3 miscarriages was a ride we were ready to get off. The nurse eventually called us back to a consultation room that had all the posters and props of a high school health class, where we nervously played on our phones until the doctor finally came into the room. She sat down, looked through my medical history paperwork, and in no more than 5 minutes told us exactly what she thought was wrong and how she planned to fix it. She confidently assured us that we did not have anything we needed to worry about and that she thought we would carry eventually to full term. We left the doctor's office feeling very assured and encouraged. I took a combination of fertility medications, including nightly shots that Ryan gave me that were supposed to help with ovulation. We were cautiously optimistic about having multiples. If you've heard me talk about this, you know I have wanted multiples my whole life. I used to make my little sister dress up matching so that we could be twins. There's a 4-year age gap, so nobody was believing that. But I just always wanted that. That was a desire God had put in my heart. And so though the doctor had said that twins would be extremely rare, only 6 to 12%, and triplets never even entered the conversation, equation, anything, Ryan and I proceeded with fertility treatments and kept praying for multiples. And despite what the doctor said, despite the fact that the odds seemed stacked against us, we continued our persistent and specific prayers. We continued to pray for 3 children, and we continued to pray for God to do more than anything we can ask or imagine. Our triplets were conceived 6 months later, and God answered our heartfelt prayers through the wisdom and the skill of the doctors. He chose to use medication to help bring about the family that we so desperately desired, and maybe He wants to do the same in your life. A woman wrote a question that I think many women may ask. As a Christian, how do you justify seeing a fertility doctor? There are many of these types of questions, like how did we justify seeing a fertility doctor? Is seeing a fertility doctor playing God? Are babies born with fertility help any less miraculous? How do we talk to our spouses about going to see a fertility doctor? It's so awkward. How do I keep enjoying my life, figuring out my purpose while struggling with infertility? So I would love to answer some of these questions today. So the first question is, how did we justify seeing a fertility doctor? Last October, I kept getting the flu, even with the flu shot. No matter what I did, it seemed like I kept getting sick and I kept being out of commission for weeks. I didn't pray about what I should do. I didn't ask respected leaders in the church for their counsel. I was sick and I needed a doctor. The same is true for people who are continuing to experience fertility problems. And I know that God made Sarah and Abraham parents at 90 years old, but I really don't see that happening anymore. Christians have deemed the medical condition of infertility a spiritual issue, and is keeping a lot of couples from getting the medical help that they need. However, seeing a fertility doctor is often the most pro-life choice a couple can make. There would have been nothing spiritual about me continually losing babies when medical solutions were available. Wanting to bring life into the world is fulfilling the biblical command to be fruitful and multiply. And so, of course, it's up to you. It's up to you as a couple if you're going to see a fertility doctor, but that is how we reasoned in our mind. That's what we believed to be true, that it was common sense. We were having these medical problems. We needed to see a medical professional. 2, is seeing a fertility doctor playing God. God opens and closes the womb. Simple as that. Does God need help? No. Does God use modern medicine to help correct issues in our imperfect bodies? Yes. No baby is born outside of God's will. God doesn't have to readjust his plans for the world when a baby is born via fertility treatment. God is more powerful than fertility medication, and I can tell you from experience that receiving fertility treatment does not ensure a baby is going to be born. For as many couples who receive children from medical help, just as many have failed attempt stories. We are not powerful enough to trick, outsmart, or outmedicate God. The third question we're going to look at is, are babies born with fertility help any less miraculous? This may seem like a weird question for some of you, but those of us who have experienced getting pregnant from fertility treatments know what I'm talking about. And we get asked all the time if the triplets were natural. Most often by the checkout ladies at Target. But our answer is the triplets were supernatural. We specifically prayed for 3 biological children, for multiples, and for God to do more than anything we can imagine, and God answered that. The fact that God answered so specifically and so creatively is nothing short of miraculous. God either opens the womb or he doesn't. Whether a child is conceived through the help of science, medication, or a memory lapse and taking birth control pills, or carefully timed family planning, every child is a miracle worthy to be celebrated. The reason God sometimes uses medical intervention is something we'll have to ask him when we get to heaven. But every life conceived is equally valuable. Every answered prayer for a child is worthy of praise to our Lord. The fourth question is, how do I talk to my spouse about going to the fertility doctor? Super awkward. Let's just put that out there, right? But the best advice I can give you is to be sensitive, be humble, be open, and be loving when talking to your spouse about seeking help. We can all admit that the fertility topic is super awkward. Saying fertility doctor always made me think of the monkey like Rafiki from The Lion King. Like, it just seems so weird. But the idea of talking to a stranger about fertility issues can seem invasive, embarrassing, just odd. But from experience, I'm going to tell you, fertility doctors have like an honorary degree in sensitivity training. I was amazed at their ability to talk about bodily functions while keeping a straight face, but they do it. The doctor's appointment likely won't be as bad as you imagine it will be, and even if the appointment is as bad as you have imagined, with the alternative being not having a child, it may be worth the awkward appointment. Please don't write off fertility doctors and treatment as too expensive before researching your options. You would be amazed at the different options and programs for fertility treatment. I'm going to tell you something that helped us the most. Before we ever saw our first doctor, I felt impressed. I felt that God told me to sit down and write out how I knew that God had made Ryan and me for each other. So let me explain. We were about to get the news of whose fault it was. And if you're struggling with this, you know what I'm talking about. But usually it's either the man or the woman. It's someone's body that isn't working right. And I just knew as soon as we got that result, that was going to, of course, be something that we had to think about. Like, okay, well, if we're meant to be together, then why would this be happening? It's just the truth. And so I sat down, and for 30 minutes, I wrote how I knew exactly that God had given Ryan to me as my husband and me as his wife. All the things that had happened when we were dating, when we were engaged, in our newlywed time. And I put scripture in there, how I knew that God had ordained, that he had already known, he had planned who I was supposed to marry. And so it was important to decide ahead of time, before we got any kind of results, how we knew without a shadow of a doubt that God had placed us together. And if you're like, well, I don't really have those stories, let me just tell you, if you're married, you're supposed to be together. Okay, so that just kind of settles that. But decide ahead of time that no matter what the future brings, you are a unit, you are a couple, you are ordained by God to be that person's spouse. So while medically it may be someone's fault, which is very hard to swallow, decide ahead of time that your fertility struggle is not someone's fault, but is a path God has specifically designed you to journey together. Lastly, how do I keep enjoying life with fertility struggles? So, kind of the idea is that eventually you're going to get pregnant, but that's not true for everyone. And sometimes it's years, sometimes it's decades. So what do we do in the meantime? Or what do we do if that never happens? God has a plan for your life that is not contingent on your ability to become pregnant. God gives us what we need. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if by that rationale, if you don't have a baby, then that is not what you need right now. I know that's hard. I know that's heartbreaking and tough to hear. But I also know that my worst year personally was one of my best years spiritually and in ministry. There's something different God has planned for this time, regardless of how determined you may be that it's baby time. So please don't get so consumed with ovulation tests, pregnancy tests, baby apps, baby clothes sites, or even reading pregnancy blogs that you miss what God has for you today. I don't know what's right for your family. I do know that too many couples are struggling in silence with fertility problems, and too many women are repeatedly experiencing heartache while medical solutions are available. As I told a girl crying to me in anthropology the other day who had just received a report from her OB that she would not be able to conceive, well, it's a good thing that we have modern medicine of 2019 and that God can do anything. So let's take advantage of living in an age where modern medicine can help accomplish our dreams for a family. Let us remember that we serve a God who can do more than anything we hope or imagine.